Hi, cities. How are you doing? Welcome to Naya Sim, and thank you all so much for all the love and support. Hope you all are doing great. I remember that I brought a video about a white woman from Alabama who said that, she was asked, what if, people, the government want to bring back slavery? And she said, if they want to bring it back, let them bring it back and all of that. A lot of people are still so much interested in with the video, and they're still giving their opinion on what she said and all that. And I am the one saying that I am not going to analyze whatever she said. That whatever she said is what she said. She meant it, and there is no need looking for a way to turn it upside down, probably to understand it better. It's either you take it the way it is or you ignore it, right? And somebody was talking about how that particular thing she said, because she was like, she was like, bringing back slavery. If it's okay, it's okay. It's not really the most important thing. She also said something else along the line where she was talking about white women obeying their husband and also being housewives, doing the duties and doing like some certain things and all that. And I am saying, how can you say that is the most white supremacy thing? Like she said, from both things she said, being a housewife or being intimidated or being whatever by your husband because that is what you choose, right? Slavery, nobody ever chose to be slave, right? That thing just happened. People were taken away. I don't know if you all understand that. Whether it is by constitution, against the law and all that, man, that is not something anybody can compare. Let's get into
Alabama wanted slavery back, you'd be okay with that?
Sure. If everyone in the state wants it.
I know that crazy ass clip of that dumbass bitch is rolling all over the internet, but I just want to remind y'all that in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, which is the Supreme Court case that overturned Roe versus Wade, the majority opinion on the Supreme Court compared people not being able to petition their state legislators on issues of abortion to black school children being segregated in public schools. They used Brown versus Board of Education as precedent for that decision. Let me roll it back for you. They said that black school children being segregated and Jim Crow era laws were the same as not allowing pro-lifers to decide what other people do with their bodies. They literally made those people out to be the same as people facing racism. That comparison really fucking happened. So this logic that this little girl is rolling with is par for the course for these motherfuckers, okay? I also want to remind you that the reason why this entire fuck shit happened is because Donald Trump got to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices on the court. We know damn well that none of this would have happened under Hillary Clinton. Y'all gotta just get with the program, okay? And understand that the next president is probably going to get to appoint 2 Supreme Court justices. And I need y'all to remember that shit.
So if everyone in Alabama wanted slavery back, you'd be okay with that?
Sure. If everyone in the state wants it, go ahead. What do I give a
That clip has been making the rounds, but there's another one that I saw that I think is as equally, if not more important to talk about.
My dad was better at leading the household. My mom was absolutely not. My boyfriend is literally better at leading everything. He takes over all. He basically is like my manager because I cannot get it together because I'm too emotional to handle all these things. I can't handle my deals and my contracts and people hitting me up and calling me and doing all these things. I'm literally not emotionally stable enough to do it. If I didn't have him, I would not be where I am in my career.
I think that there's a lot of women out there that want to take on that feminine role, that want to take care of the kids, that want to be at home.
Yeah, there's
that don't want to kind of lead. So I think that that's the majority point.
I've been talking to thousands of women every day. I'm in multiple group chats. Most of these women are 25 to 75. We all agree because we want to be in traditional relationships with conservative men, and most of us are, and a lot of them have kids. We don't want to do those things. We want to go back to a more natural approach to living because that is where we thrive and that's where we're happy. All the women that are the happiest are the ones that get to be at home with their, and they're statistically proven. Max Luger just did a video on this. Statistically, right-leaning women end up happier. And the thing is, every single woman I talk to, we don't want to be girl bosses. We don't want to be CEOs. I don't feel accomplished at the end of the day working 15 hours and coming home and being masculine. I would love to just sit at home and cook and clean all day. And every single woman I hang out with and I'm aligned with feels exactly the same way. And to us, it's not a sign of weakness. It's actually where our strength and power is. I think we make it a home. We make it a beautiful life. And we're all very proud of that.
So I know it might not seem like it, but everything she said and the reasons she gave are all rooted in white supremacy. How can that be? I'm going to explain why, in part by reading from this book here, and I want you to keep in mind that this book on paramilitary and white power movements in America was published in 2018. American white supremacy had long depended on the policing of white women's bodies. The landmark Loving v. Virginia Supreme Court decision rendered anti-miscegenation laws unconstitutional in 1967. And public opinion polls showed that Americans not only rapidly came to disapprove of such bans, but also quickly forgot that a majority had held them dear just a few years earlier. However, social issues that were related to white women's sexuality, reproduction, and motherhood, but typically described without explicitly racist terminology, including opposition to busing, abortion, contraception, welfare, and immigration, appealed well beyond the white power movement. They extended to the mainstream New Right base and mobilized the suburbanites in the political center. The continued focus on policing white women's sexuality and reproduction in the post-Vietnam War era indicates the tacit presence of white supremacy in many social issues that remained important to the New Right in the 1980s and 1990s, and belies the idea of a colorblind mainstream. To be sure, the paramilitary structure of the movement meant that men held all leadership roles and that women's activism was circumscribed. Movement discourse regularly objectified women. Even when women donned their own camouflage fatigues and marched for themselves, as they did in the WPP, leaders still viewed them as mothers of future Aryan warriors and objects of sexual reward. Some wives of prominent leaders also rose in the movement by forming racist women's organizations affiliated with groups run by their husbands. Kathleen Metzger ran the Suburban Aryan Women's League in the 1980s. Several of her publications referred to the frustration of League members at getting no respect from the men and having no place in the movement. However, the League still proposed activities that hinged on traditional ideas of a woman's sphere, and even more important, as one flyer proclaimed, as bearers of the future white race. The Aryan Women's League located its concerns within the bounds of home and family, a terrain marked the movement as feminine. In addition to running their own organizations and producing their own printed materials, women in the white power movement worked extensively in the social sphere, contributing to the building and maintenance of social networks, recruitment, the production and circulation of family-oriented cultural products like recipes and homeschooling materials, and the social normalization of young activists. However, their role remained limited by the rigidly patriarchal and paramilitary structure of the white power movement, both in top-down leadership and in local operations of male-led cells. Indeed, the white power movement had evolved far past anything so easily recognizable as a hooded white-robed Klan march. On Main Street, at Estes Park, and in the militia movement in general, Ruby Ridge codified an alliance of tax protesters, radical anti-abortionists, militiamen, racists, identity Christians, survivalists, conspiracy theorists, and those who simply believed the U.S. government had grown too large. As anti-abortion fervor, resistance to gun control laws, and anger over big government grew among mainstream conservatives during the 1990s, the white power movement leveraged these issues for recruitment. And then I want to read you the end of the book. In the late 1990s, the movement largely relocated into the online spaces it had begun to build more than a decade earlier. Continued movement activity unfolded mostly out of public view. While a few scholars joined the watchdogs in monitoring and studying websites such as Stormfront, white power was generally regarded as a fringe and untenable ideology. There is, of course, insufficient historical distance or archival material to offer large-scale interpretations of the present moment. What is inescapably clear from the history of the white power movement, however, is that the lack of public understanding, effective prosecution, and state action left an opening for continued white power activism. The state and public opinion have failed to sufficiently halt white power violence or refute white power belief systems, and failed to present a vision of the future that might address some of the concerns that lie behind its more diffuse, coded, and mainstream manifestations. Understanding white power as a social movement is a project both of historical relevance and of vital public importance. Knowledge of the history of white power activism is integral to preventing future acts of violence and to providing vital context to current political developments. Violent outright racism and anti-Semitism were live currents in these decades, waiting for the opportunity to resurface in overt form. This story renders legible the many ways that racial ideology and incessant warfare have underwritten political issues that extend well beyond the fringe. It powerfully reveals how white power rhetoric and activism, time and again, have influenced mainstream U.S. politics, and most especially in the aftermath of war. Wanting to get married or have kids or be a stay-at-home mom or a homeschool, none of that is in and of itself inherently upholding white supremacy. It is asking yourself why you want those things. Because I hope in reading all of that, it helped to explain why everything she said and the reasons she gave are rooted in white supremacy. Like, flat out. She doesn't have to be overtly racist to understand the things she believes and why she believes them. White supremacy. And again, it's not to say you can't want those things. It is asking yourself why. And if the reasons you are giving me as to why are white supremacist talking points, we have a fucking problem. We're less than 3 weeks away from a critical election, and not just the presidency. There are a ton of down-ballot races, local elections that are going to have an effect on this. I really need white women to start thinking about what they believe and support and vote for. Because I don't think enough white women truly understand what's at stake. Like, white women are about to cost us the election again. in a way that, like, again, I don't think you really understand. This dream, this vision, this want you say you have for the future and your life, when it is rooted in white supremacy, it's never going to happen. Because white supremacy and patriarchy dictate that men and white men sit above anything and everything else. I made sure to include that portion of the book where she's complaining about how these men are not giving them any respect and there's no place for them in the movement. You think? I need you to really think about it and let it sink in. Following that rabbit hole all the way down, as a female white supremacist, she is complaining that the men are still not giving her a seat at the table. Because there isn't and will never be a seat at the table for women. Because again, white supremacy and patriarchy dictate that never happened. Like, I really need our critical thinking skills to start clicking here. For every white woman I know is getting defensive right now, don't take it up with me. You need to ask yourself why the things you believe and the things you say you want, the reasons you're giving for them, are lining up with that of literal white supremacists, of people who are like Pe0ple, Shmeo Schmatzis, militia members, Klan members. Like, you need to ask yourself why the things I say I want and the reasons I'm telling people I want them line up with that of a literal white supremacist. So great question. I would say because most Americans are willing to say or admit that first clip is a crazy thing to say, right? She even goes on later in that clip to be like, you know, you're not going to get me with this gotcha question, which is a whole other conversation to have. But most Americans are willing to say, like, slavery is bad. But I don't think that most white Americans, in particular white women, are able to recognize the threat and the danger in that second clip, because it's not on its face like white supremacy the way it is in that first clip, like it is in the second. And there are conversations to be had about how there is still modern day slavery in the United States, in particular in the agriculture industry. If you want to learn more about it, you can follow the Fair Food Program of the CIW. But I think that they were talking about it through the context of how most Americans know and understand the history of slavery in the United States. I don't think most white people, in particular white women, pick up on the thinly veiled, coded language in that second clip that is just as deeply rooted in white supremacy. That's why I did the second clip where I was reading different passages in the book to highlight the inconsistencies in white supremacy. You can't win for losing, essentially. Like this idea that white men want white women to stay home and cook and clean and raise children and are in subservient roles because as men, they are head of the household. At the same time, they need women to go out and create community and build social ties and to create disguises for them and need them to run money and weapons and take a very active participating role in pushing forward the white power movement. It's this idea, stay home, but also, right, like the using women's labor and talents and smarts for the purpose of men. You know, she basically walks face first to the point at the end of that clip. She's talking about how, like, her and other women like her, they feel like they're what create a home, that they're what make it a happy, loving environment. But not because of these quote-unquote traditional values or these ideas of feminine roles or simply because you're a mom. Like, it's understanding you can want those things, but if your idea of why you want it is rooted in white supremacy, this idea that this is why you should want these things, this is why you should be doing these things is rooted in white supremacy, it's never going to happen because white supremacy doesn't allow for it to. And there's so many other things to talk about around this, but like I feel like this is where we have to start in acknowledging and recognizing like white supremacy talking points when like that's what's popping up, that's the language that's being used, especially if it's in like a very coded, like thinly veiled way. Like, do you remember during the 2008 financial crisis, we started finding out the police departments hadn't been processing rape kits, and for like years? And again, there's so many conversations to have in and around that, but the bottom line is that this country shows time and again how much we don't give a fuck about women. We simply do not care. This country doesn't give a shit about women. But now I'm supposed to be more scared of some boogeyman you've made up that's supposedly knocking on my door? Like, I'm supposed to believe the people using white supremacy talking points are going to fix it? You know, like, I'll stick in the reality we currently live in where you don't give a shit without all of the extra added white supremacy on top of it, thanks. And again, in white supremacy, it's not that white men care about white women, it's that they think only white women should be there to uphold white men. You know, I remember reading a story where in just one city, there were nearly 800 serial rapists because those men were allowed to continue committing sexual assaults because those kits went unprocessed. But I'm supposed to think, like, that all of a sudden they care? All along, even now, this country continues to show how much we don't care about women. But you're going to throw some white supremacy talking points at me and that's supposed to make me think you give a shit? Like, so it's understanding and recognizing these talking points for what they are. Because this isn't the solution. And in fact, it's going to make it 10 times worse. It always has, it always does, it always will. So it's being able to learn to recognize and acknowledge it for what it is, because like I said in that first video, the white supremacy is a lot more obvious than it is in that second one, but it's just as important to understand the white supremacy in that second video, the language that's being used that may not be so on its face and overt form rooted in language of white supremacy, but learning to understand that that's exactly what. Although movement rhetoric often reduced women to mute symbols, maternal or sexual, male activists within the movement needed real white women to validate men's activism both rhetorically and practically. The wives of white power activists played critical roles in establishing the credibility of their husbands. According to movement rhetoric, white women would be delighted with their task of bearing and raising white warriors. As Butler wrote in 1984, the thoughts of Aryan women are dominated by the desire to enter family life. Aryan women bring true love and affection in a happy, well-run home to refresh and inspire her man. The world of contented womanhood is made of family, husband, children, and home. No equal rights amendment or national organization for women buttons allowed. This anti-feminist, domestic, and subservient role of white women was paired with strictly white-only sexual relationships. Indeed, a cult of motherhood framed a wave of cultural representations of women in the white power movement and their real and imagined place within a movement usually understood through the lens of paramilitary masculinity. However, the work of real white women was equally important to both movement formation, activism, and violence as the outcome of the Fort Smith trial. Women's activism, while consciously anti-feminist in the sense that women almost uniformly avoided leadership roles in combat, worked to forge the social ties that bound the movement, to support the war on the state waged through men's violence, and to perform white womanhood in ways that carried direct appeals both to the mainstream and to juries. Symbolic invocations of endangered white women by male leaders and activists provided a crucial rhetorical tool for consolidating and directing white power activism and for making appeals to the mainstream. Several accounts of paramilitary masculinity examine women only in this symbolic register. However, the cause required the work of women themselves. In the war on the state, women were expected to bear future white warriors, train as nurses to heal the wounded, prepare stores of food and other supplies to sustain white people through apocalyptic race war, and carry out support work. Women attended and even co-owned paramilitary camps, but while the men trained in weapons, urban warfare, and demolition tactics, most of the women learned survivalist strategies such as canning, making their own soap and shampoo, and how best to prevent radiation poisoning in the event of nuclear war. In cells, women did support work including disguising male activists and driving getaway cars, destroying documents, transporting people and weapons, designing medallions meant to identify group members, and proofreading major movement tracts such as one group's declaration of war, a role that may have also created opportunities for women to make substantive contributions to such writings. White power activists codified their ideas about gender in the middle of a nationally charged debate about the place of women in American society. The women's movements of the 1960s and 70s had put forward radical claims for equality in the home and workplace, reproductive rights, and freedom from sexual violence. The Equal Rights Amendment, passed by Congress in 1972, failed to receive ratification by the states in no small part because of its purported threat of drafting women into military service and emasculating men, and by the early 1980s, its ratification seemed increasingly unlikely in the face of an ascendant conservative movement. The 1973 Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision had legalized abortion, but it also inflamed a debate about the issue that would prove enormously generative for social conservatives and a rising tide of evangelical voters. The 1988 acquittals at Fort Smith were in one sense a product of the organization and strategies of the white power movement, including cell-style organizing and a broad paramilitary infrastructure. But they also indicated the centrality of women to the movement. The trial revealed the movement's deep dependence on social connections often brokered by women. Acquittal also turned upon the systemic invocation of a primal American story about defending white women. The Fort Smith acquittals can be better understood through a close analysis of the symbolic invocation of women within white power ideology and the activism and performance, that is to say, the public actions that embodied symbolic and political meaning of a woman in the movement. The two defendants formed romantic relationships with jurors after the trial indicates that white power rhetoric held a romantic appeal for some people in broader American society. Protection of white women and their reproductive capacity represented one ideology motivating white power activists to wage war. In the movement, this went far beyond anti-miscegenation to the demand that every white woman attempt to bear children. White power leaders embraces pronatalism with urgency, going so far as to advocate polygamy in hopes of an increased birth rate among movement women. Many people across the political spectrum shared the white power movement's concerns about demographic shifts and about the waning white majority. The idea of separatism facilitated recruitment even as the movement prepared for and waged race war. Women in the white power movement would shape the sedition trial both because of the symbolic invocation of their bodies as terrain in need of defense and because of the real work women did in forming the movement, furthering its war on the state, and performing white womanhood to garner sympathy from jurors and the public. This worked precisely because the movement's story about women's purity resonated with mainstream Americans. White power women were both symbols of and actors in a common struggle to protect white women's chastity and racial reproduction, and with it, the future of whiteness itself. In the post-1988 period, the movement would incorporate new legions of, we're going to say members because I'm not going to list them out, and guide a new generation of activists to white power movement violence. And the work of white women, both as symbols and as activists, continued unabated. Indeed, when the movement used the federal sieges of 2 separatist compounds to fuel its militia groundswell, the stories it told to new recruits would be about women. I think symbolically that was their war against the American woman, the American mother, and the American white wife, said Carl Franklin, the new pastor at Orient Nations. This is the opening shot of a second American Revolution. So to answer your question, because she has to, right? I wanted to read those passages to show and highlight the contradictions. It doesn't make sense because it's not going to, because it's white supremacy. You know what I mean? It's not gonna, because it's white supremacy. That's why for white women, it's asking ourselves why we say we want some of these things, because if it's rooted in white supremacy, it's never gonna happen, right? Because the way it's set up, the dichotomy, it's never gonna happen because it's white supremacy. It's fucking stupid. Doesn't make any sense because it's.
If everyone in a state wants something, go ahead and have it.
So if everyone in Alabama wanted slavery back, you'd be okay with that?
Sure. If everyone in the state wants it, go ahead. What do I give a
All right.
I think, one, this conversation is really frustrating because it's taking place between 2 white people. 2, I constantly find myself really frustrated at the use of the most violent atrocities that have been committed against Black people to make a point. And 3, you cannot try to reason with people using sound logic who do not recognize the humanity of Black people. And kind of wanting to touch on all these different points, the reason why I find conversations like this really frustrating amongst white people is because usually it's coming from somebody who's white, who's well-intentioned, trying to reason with another white person who is very obviously off the deep end in their radical ideology, and is trying to say to them, logically, right, this doesn't make any sense. They are never going to see what you are seeing when you try to use situations that they have never given a fuck about. People like that woman have never given a fuck about the plights of Black people, have never really cared about the ramifications of slavery, and are not going to care when you phrase it this way. And I think it's really important to point out that when white people want to have these types of conversations, you have to point out things that are going to affect white people. Because a lot of white people like her believe in things like the replacement theory, like the idea that the government is allowing in all these immigrants and non-white immigrants in particular into the country so that they can replace white people. And so if he wanted to actually have this conversation, he should have said something like, if a state wants to allow unlimited, unfettered immigration, you don't have to get any papers, you don't have to do anything, would you be okay with that? Then you would start to see this tone in this conversation change, and maybe you would actually be able to reason with this person. But again, you cannot reason with people who do not recognize the humanity of Black people. And again, I also will say, I find it very weird when white people try to use Black plights as a gotcha for other white people. I feel like there is just a very insidious level of, and again, I don't know, I've seen that kid kinda, I think he does lives on here debating people or whatever, but I think when you get to a point in your debating of people or having these conversations with people where everything you think of is a debate and not the real humanity of others, that's where you get these really strange conversations that we're seeing that are deeply rooted in white supremacy.
So this is all I got from this video, and sincerely speaking, I am no longer trying to make excuses for these people, because I feel like they know what they are doing. She knew what she said when she said it, and she absolutely meant what she said, right? I am not going to try to bend it or probably ask if maybe opportunity was given the other way, or maybe if you had tried using another talking point and all that to convey the message, that probably they would understand the implications or the weight of what she was saying. But the truth is that she knew what she was saying. She said what she said, and there is nothing anybody can do about it, right? And also, the fact that people can actually come online, say some certain things about Black people without even, being questioned and all that, it's completely absurd and really crazy, right? And I feel like they also do not see Black people's humanity, because how do you advocate for something that messed, millions of people up until this very moment. A lot of people are still trying to recover from it. Or is it because she is ignorant and does not know anything? Now, why the whole conversation? The other woman was trying to make a point where she said, you think that where she said, okay, somebody asked her just a quick question. Why do you say that the second clip is more important? Because it is more relevant since slavery is already against the Constitution. I mean, I also, when she said that, I was like, why did she say the second one is more important, or giving so much attention to it, right? And then I was like, sometimes, you can't trust these people enough, because for somebody to say that if they, Alabama said that they should bring back slavery. Do you know what it means to bring back, full-time bringing back slavery? Now, let me talk about the white supremacy talking point, where she made mention about how women probably cook and all that. All they do is she want to be a stay-at-home mom or take care of this, and they see men like men are like everything and all that. See, all I am going to say is that I know it is rooted in white supremacy, all right? But then it is what she wants, or what majority of them want. They probably want to be a stay-at-home mom. Nobody is forcing her to be a stay-at-home mom. Probably that is what she has decided, right? And that is what they know how to do best. Because nobody in 2024 wants to be a full-time housewife. There are some that may want that it's what you want, but I am not advocating for full-time housewife and all that without any backup or something. I know what I am saying. So for me, it is really, really, really a crazy thing to say. Bring back slavery. It's okay to bring back slavery in Alabama in 2024. In 2024, a whole human being, a whole somebody that is breathing, a whole somebody with 2 legs and 4 eyes. Open her mouth, on wherever camera to say something like this. This is to tell you, whatever that might have been or what is running in her mind without camera. Because sometimes some people say the unthinkable on camera. Then imagine, I am not scared of this one she said on camera. I am scared of the ones she probably said behind camera, because for her to have the guts, audacity to come out and say this, that tells you a whole lot about her. And that it's on period. I don't care what anybody got to say about it. I ain't giving anybody second chance. There are some things you give people second chance, but this particular one does not require second chance. It is either you believe it, or you leave it, or you ignore it. You have 3 options to believe or don't believe, or ignore. Don't even think of it. Now, let's get into the fact that some people still think people that look like me are commodities, that you can actually go around, grab them, do whatever you want to do with them, or use them as you want. Why? Because absolutely, do they really amount anything, or that is what they did before? And I think that is also, what their life should be all about. Number one is that the truth is that that is one of the problems I have with conservatives. Those people that do not think or do not reason that people that look like me are part, he or she is part of people that look like me. Because I have seen so many people, Black people, that do not believe that we are the same. They feel maybe probably proximity to whiteness has already made them feel they are white, and they just do not want to associate with people like me. Now let me tell you all something. If anything is happening, even those that are brown person or a caramel person or whatever you are person, and the ones that are darker than me, right? First of all, they are giving you all away before any other person. Because some of them think that I am covered, I am insured. Why? Because probably I'm a conservative. You are not anything. If they are studying, let's assume it, God forbid, but if this slavery is about to start today, you all are going to be the number one people they will use as slavery before it gets to other people, right? Because you probably think that you are human, but you don't know that you are nothing. So for you all to be coming out on, because I see a lot of them coming out online to scream, Black people are this, Black people are that, Black people are idiots, Black people are, all the time on the internet. I see a lot of them. I see you all. So like you all can hear what she said, right? And that is in Alabama, right? They are starting with you all first. Byron, what Team Squad, Donald Byron, all the Candice Owen, what's his name? Rob Smith and John Paul. All of them on this Wolfman, whatever his name is. I see all of you. Jeff Mead, they are starting with you all. I mean, when I say they are starting with you all, I meant it, they are really starting with you all. And that would really be good, amazing. Because all you all do is go online and support evil. And let me tell us something. For those that think they will get away with this, you guys aren't getting away with it. One day, it is absolutely going to knock you all down. See you all in my next video. Bye for now.